Senator Chambers, you are recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, this is a bill which I have no understanding of at this point. I just have a vague notion, so I would like to ask Senator Stootman, without his amendment first, what does this bill allow which currently is not allowed?
Senator Stootman, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
If nothing is done with your bill, there's a certain situation that exists. What would your bill, if adopted, allow which is not currently allowed without your bill?
Senator Chambers, the difference in what is currently allowed right now is all-terrain vehicles are allowed access to the public roads if they're used for the ag purposes, driving from one farm to another farm. And what the change is now is what we're doing in the bill that we have, the amendment that we have adopted, is that in a community where there is jurisdiction, I'll give you the example of like Columbus, where they have jurisdiction in that community. They want to have jurisdiction over the control of these all-terrain vehicles under their jurisdiction.
So they would be empowered to allow these vehicles to be used on all roads, regardless of where the vehicle was to be driven, if they chose to do that.
These vehicles can only be driven at the present time for agricultural purposes from farm to farm.
And with yours, they could be driven for non-agricultural purposes anywhere within the jurisdiction of that locality. Is that what you're saying?
No. They still can be only utilized in the operation of going from farm to farm. We're not allowing all-terrain vehicles to be able to go everywhere, anytime, by any licensed driver.
And Senator, that's why I don't understand what's happening. If your bill is adopted and you allow these local jurisdictions to govern the use of these vehicles, but that jurisdiction cannot allow them to be used differently from the way they're used now, the only thing I can see is that they can restrict the use even further. Is that true or untrue?
This is not true, because a local jurisdiction can allow four-wheelers. I think it is already in the bill, in the statute. Four-wheelers can be used for parades, and I don't have that with me right now, but they can be used for certain things. Some of the smaller communities that are villages, they use a lot of four-wheelers as far as spraying their parks, and if their local jurisdiction, allows that, they could do that. It's under their jurisdiction. What we're trying to define is who has the jurisdiction over those four-wheelers.
Okay, who has the jurisdiction, but who is the state law going to determine what use can be made of them? And if so, what are the local jurisdictions going to be allowed to permit these things to do, which they cannot do under present state law?
1 minute.
In other words, I don't see what the purpose of the bill is. I'm lost.
Okay, Senator Chambers, what the purpose of the bill is, and I'll give you the example, the problem that we're having, is that the community has four-wheelers going through a community, going from farm to farm, from one farm on one side of town to the same property owner's farm on the other side of the town. The community maybe doesn't want to allow those four-wheelers to go through the town.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Stootman. Mr. President, members of the legislature, I'm in agreement with Senator White's amendment. I'm in agreement with Senator Lathrop's comments. And Senator Carlson, the only reason this will not be the Bermuda Triangle is because you have 2 lawyers and 1 layperson. I'm not licensed to practice, so I'm not a lawyer. When Senator Heidemann brought us a bill that will allow haying along the roads for certain purposes, I raised the issue of liability, and Senator Heidemann immediately looked at that and found a way to address it so that if harm is done by people who are haying, they will have liability coverage so that the state is not going to be left with a problem along those lines. This is a situation where it would not be the state, it would be the individual. I have done a lot of things during my time in this legislature to support what might be called the rural, farming, ranching, outstate Nebraska community. But they're not going to get carte blanche from me on everything. If they're going to be able to use these public highways, they are going to have the insurance that they should have. If one of them runs into me, then am I supposed to go after that person's farm? You know that I would, or ranch, or anything else that person might have to make me whole from the damage he or she caused. What Senator Fisher is talking about boggles my mind. I don't even understand what she's getting at. I genuinely don't. You don't have to drive 20 miles in order to have an accident. I'm going to tell y'all something that's a joke. I'm telling you in front, that's what it's supposed to be. A fellow was watching television, and they were talking about safety on this program. And the comment was made that most accidents happen within a half mile of where a person lives. So he just started laughing in his living room with his wife, who was sitting on the sofa next to him. She asked, "What are you laughing at?" He said, "I'm going to take care of that so we will never have to worry about it." She said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "We're going to move." He missed the point. Wherever you live, not just where you live now. So Senator Fisher might be thinking, if I can give any rationality to what she said, that maybe the distance traveled is not that long. Maybe that's what it is. But it doesn't take a great amount of distance for an accident to take place. It does not have to be one of those that appears catastrophic when you look at it. Maybe vehicles have not been smashed to smithereens. There may not be blood spread all over the highway, glass strewn hither, thither, and yonder. But somebody nevertheless can sustain a serious injury. Prevention is better than cure. Senator Fisher wants to talk about not opening up something on select file. That's done all the time. But now that I'm looking at this bill and looking at the nature of the vehicles, this bill, if there's no insurance component, doesn't need to pass. And then we can start the whole thing with the committee hearing on a bill next session where you talk about what Senator Stoopman has brought and include the requirement of insurance. But either Senator Fisher is being a bit disingenuous this morning, or she hasn't paid attention to the way this legislature operates during all the years that she has been here. There are proposals that are brought forth on a bill which is on final reading. We will pull that bill back from final reading to select file to add an amendment, and the amendment will be a subject which was not the subject of a public hearing. Don't you new people who are here sit here and listen to those who are inexperienced in terms of watching how the process works, who understands the dynamics of legislating. I realize she's a chairperson now. I haven't been a chairperson in 34, 35 years. But I have watched and mastered this process. And what is being offered by Senator White is not a strange idea, and it's not unusual that it would be offered on select file. But if we can't get coverage on those vehicles, either you're going to say they cannot be on public roadways, or the bill is going to have some trouble making it. And I will have to see if I can stop this bill from going anywhere, even though it's on select file. but it's Senator Stootman's bill,
Time.
not Senator Fisher's. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this bill is not going to just float across the bill today. I want to ask Senator Ashford a question.
Senator Ashford, would you yield to a question?
Short one.
Senator Ashford, did you hear a discussion about some of the damage that can result from accidents involving these vehicles?
Yes.
Suppose there's a car being driven by a young mother who has a young child, and the child is severely injured in an accident caused by one of the people using it for the purposes and in the manner specified in this bill.
Yes.
Who's going to pay for the medical treatment needed for that young child?
The farmer will.
Now, how's the farmer going to do it?
Well, I assume if the farmer's in operation, the farmer's going to have liability insurance and is going to pay the bill.
Could the farmer have an employee who's driving the vehicle?
Then workman's comp would. Well, if this is another person that's injured, I think the risk is small, Senator Chambers.
Senator, when there's an accident, only one person is hurt. They always say, well, if such and such saves one person, fine. Well, I want to do it differently, but think about the one person who is hurt. There is no insurance on this vehicle. The person driving it has no farm, no assets. What becomes of that child and the medical care needed?
Senator, the direct answer is that if there's no insurance, then that person would have to look to other sources like the state for payment.
Could you speak in your mic so I could hear you?
I said that they would look to the state for payment. I understand the point. I'm trying to understand what case you're doing. These are farm vehicles that are driven in conjunction with their farm operations.
They're being driven on public roads, and they can cause serious damage in an accident.
Granted.
But you're saying they should be given a pass and not required to carry insurance to make a person whole who is harmed as a result of their negligence. You're saying, in other words, the state should be the underwriter, and anybody who is hurt should be taken care of by the state. That's what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is I think the liability issue is an issue that we could address in the Judiciary Committee, for example. But what I'm saying is I think this bill, as it is, though it raises that issue, should go forward without that provision, because I don't think the risk is that great. Because I think you're dealing with farmers who are going to have liability insurance that would cover the particular accident. That's what I'm
Then are you willing to have an amendment that says the farmer shall have sufficient liability insurance to respond in damages in any accident that occurs while one of these vehicles is being driven on the public road?
What I'm saying is I don't think it's necessary to amend this bill to do that.
Let me ask you, are you willing to see that done? Require liability coverage somewhere that will cover damage caused by these accidents.
I think it's a good issue, and I'm willing to look at it. I think this bill is fine the way it is to go forward now, and I think we could look at a liability insurance issue as we do every day or almost every day in the Judiciary Committee.
So then you don't really care how many people may be harmed or the extent of the harm for the purpose of just maybe you want to accommodate the farmers because you keep mentioning them. Is that what you make more important than anything else?
The way I read it, it's a bill to help farmers who need access to the roadways, to cross the roadways for their farm business. That's how I read it.
No, they don't just cross a roadway. They drive on the road.
I understand.
Well, now that you understand that they're not just crossing the roadway like a chicken because they want to get to the other side.
That's right.
Do you have a different view now about why there should be liability coverage? Or you just don't care?
No, of course I care, Senator Chambers.
Well, are you going to...
What I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to tell you is I think for the purposes of this bill that there's sufficient protections in it as it is because of the use.
Tell me the protection.
The protections are the limited use that is in the bill.
Limited use doesn't protect somebody if they're harmed while it's being used in that limited way.
It's like...
Let me back up. Okay. Are you saying to me that nobody can be harmed during what you call the limited use of this vehicle? Is that what you're convinced of?
I'm convinced that the risk is slight and that it's not necessary in this bill to burden this bill with that type of amendment when it can be addressed at a later time.
But it's okay to burden the state and everybody else.
Well, the state could be burdened.
Time.